Yep.
immigration. It's such a complex journey, right? So deeply personal. People move for all sorts of reasons: economic hope, maybe finding a place they feel they belong culturally. It's shaped by so many things.
Yeah.
Finding a job, dealing with visas, feeling accepted, just the day-to-day quality of life. But measuring that's tricky. The problem we often run into is, well, the tools we have now, they tend to paint with really broad strokes. They miss the crucial details, the stuff that really matters to individuals. It's like trying to understand a whole person from just one snapshot.
Exactly. And that gap, that's really where the personalized impact index comes into the picture. It's designed specifically to tackle that challenge head on. Its whole purpose is to give us a much more innovative, dynamic framework, and crucially, one that's sensitive to demographics. It helps measure immigrant satisfaction and success across countries, but, in a way that reflects individual realities, moving beyond those generalizations.
Okay, so this sounds promising. For you, our listener, this deep dive is really about understanding how this index could potentially empower immigrants, helping them make informed choices tailored, really tailored, to their specific backgrounds. But it's not just for individuals, is it? You mentioned policymakers, too.
That's right. It also gives policymakers a much sharper tool. They can use it to see how well their integration policies are actually working and where the gaps are.
Getting beyond the surface level to what's really happening.
Yeah.
So, the big question then. What actually makes this personalized impact index different? What sets it apart from, everything else out there?
Well, it starts with the fundamental ideas behind it, the conceptual foundations. Several things really set it apart. First, and this is huge, is personalization. The core idea here is that treating immigrants like one single group. That's always been a major flaw, both in policy and for people making decisions.
Right. Everyone's experience is different.
Absolutely. So the impact index doesn't just add a filter. It fundamentally argues that personalization isn't just a nice feature, it's the missing piece in understanding immigrant success. It makes that visible by directly accounting for how experiences shift based on things like nationality and gender. Second, it looks at things from many angles, multidimensional criteria. So it's not just about economics, it covers legal aspects, social, cultural, language, even personal well-being.
A much broader view.
Exactly. And third, there's a concept of balanced weighting. This includes something really important, a new, strong recognition of quality of life, or QEL. This makes sure countries that offer, say, really good material well-being get fair credit, even if maybe social integration is tougher there.
Okay, that emphasis on quality of life for balance is interesting. But is there a risk it might overshadow other things? Like if a country scores super high on QL, but is maybe lacking in social acceptance or legal rights, how does the index handle that balance?
That's a really good point. And it's handled because QOL, while weighted significantly, is still just one part of the whole picture. Remember, the multidimensional criteria, all those other factors, social acceptance, legal stuff, cultural openness, they still carry their own weight and feed into the final score.
Got it.
So yeah, a country with amazing QOL but poor social integration, its overall score would definitely be pulled down by those weaker areas. It forces a holistic view. Another really key difference is how it deals with language policy impacts. The index actually gives bonus points if English or the immigrant's own native language is widely usable in the country.
Oh, interesting.
And conversely, it applies a penalty if there's excessive pressure to learn a totally new, unrelated language. This kind of challenges that old assumption that assimilation, especially language assimilation, is always the top priority. It suggests that, forcing someone into a completely new language can actually be a huge barrier to their happiness and success, sometimes more than the material benefits. That's quite a shift in perspective for policymakers.
It really is.
And finally, social openness. This gets real recognition. Things like how accepting a society is of intercultural marriage or just general diversity, these have a profound impact on whether an immigrant feels happy and like they belong.
Okay, we've got the big ideas. Now let's dive into the nuts and bolts. What are the specific ingredients, the dimensions that actually make up this personalized score, and how are they weighted against each other?
Right, let's break it down. Each dimension is scored out of 100, and the weighting shows how important each piece is considered in the overall experience. So we have things covering jobs, rights, culture, for instance, economic integration. This looks at job access, earning potential, career growth that's weighted at 15%.
Okay, 15% for economic aspects. Makes
Then
sense.
there's cultural openness and intermarriage. This gauges how accepting the society is of foreigners marrying locals, general cultural diversity. That's also 15%.
Another
Well,
15%. What else?
we have legal inclusiveness. This covers how easy it is to get visas, residency, citizenship, plus general legal rights. That's 10%. Social acceptance and belonging, things like feeling included in the community, levels of discrimination, building social networks, that's another 10%.
Right.
And identity and lifestyle freedom, basically. The freedom to practice your religion, express your culture, live your lifestyle, also 10%. Then there's immigrant dignity and happiness. This is more subjective well-being, safety, access to social services. That accounts for another 10%.
Okay, so several dimensions at 10%.
Precisely. Now, the language part we touched on, there's an English accessibility bonus up to 5% for countries where English is widely used and accepted. But there's also a potential language imposition penalty. This can deduct up to 10% if a country really pushes learning a language that's not English and not the immigrant's native tongue.
A penalty. Interesting. And the last one, you mentioned quality of life.
Yes, and this one's significant. Quality of life, QOL. This covers material well-being, healthcare, education, safety, infrastructure. This holds a substantial 25% weight.
Wow, 25%. That's the biggest piece.
It is. The thinking is that these factors profoundly impact daily existence and overall satisfaction. It's about prioritizing that lived reality.
So you've got all these dimensions, these weights. How do you actually gather the information and put it all together? Can you give us a peek behind the curtain at the methodology?
Sure. The methodology aims to be really robust and precise. First, data collection. We aggregate comprehensive data from major global sources, the OECD, UN, World Bank, Mercer surveys, the World Happiness Report, plus national statistics offices. And crucially, wherever possible, this data is broken down by nationality and gender. That's fundamental to the personalization.
Okay, so using established data sources.
Right. Then there's what we call the personalization engine. This is where the magic happens, so to speak. It takes the immigrant's profile, their nationality, gender, age, maybe profession, and uses that to adjust the weights of different dimensions or even the scores within them. The goal is to reflect what their likely real-world experience would be based on data for similar demographics.
So it adapts the index based on who you are.
Exactly. And very importantly, the scores aren't static. They're dynamically updated on a regular basis. This keeps the index relevant, reflecting changes in migration policies, economic shifts, social attitudes, or any new data that becomes available.
This sounds incredibly thorough, really powerful. But let's bring it back to the individual. What does this all mean for you, our listener? How does this index actually make an impact in the real world, beyond being just, an interesting academic tool?
Well, the applications are very practical and potentially quite impactful. For immigrants themselves, it can be a real game changer. Think of the Personalized Impact Index as a guide. It helps someone select a destination country that genuinely aligns with their specific background, their priorities, their needs.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say we have an English-speaking woman from Canada thinking about moving. For her, the index might show the UAE or perhaps even staying in Canada scoring very highly. Why? Because of things like English accessibility, maybe strong legal openness for her demographic in those places. But now, consider an Afghan man. His results might look quite different. He might be comparing, say, Austria and Pakistan. The index would help him weigh factors differently, maybe balancing potentially better social acceptance in one place against tougher living conditions or legal hurdles versus perhaps better material conditions but other challenges elsewhere. It highlights those trade-offs for him.
That reminds me of someone I spoke to once. They moved entirely for a job, a great economic opportunity, but they found the cultural isolation just crushing. This index seems to really put a spotlight on those non-economic factors, doesn't it?
Precisely. It forces those often overlooked human elements, belonging, identity, dignity, right into the calculation alongside economics and law. And for policymakers, it's like getting a diagnostic report. The index can pinpoint very specific areas that need attention. Is it language barriers holding people back? Is discrimination a major issue? Are legal pathways too complex? Are social services lacking?
So they can target their efforts more effectively.
Exactly. It allows for much more targeted, evidence-based policy design, hopefully leading to integration efforts that are more effective and, frankly, more equitable. And let's not forget researchers and NGOs. For them, it offers a really granular way to understand immigrant experiences across different groups. This is invaluable for designing support programs that actually meet specific needs or for tracking migration outcomes over time in a more nuanced way.
That granularity seems key. But with all these different scores and dimensions, how do you make sure policymakers, for instance, look at the whole picture? Is there a risk they might just cherry pick one area they want to improve and ignore others,
Yep.
where the countries may be falling short?
That's a valid concern. The index provides both the overall composite score and the breakdown by dimension for that very reason. The idea is to present a holistic view first, encourage them to see how everything is interconnected. So it's not just about chasing a high score in one category, it's about understanding the strengths and weaknesses across the board, and then hopefully developing a balanced strategy to address them.
Okay, let's make this even more concrete. Walk us through that example you mentioned earlier. Imagine an Afghan male immigrant. He's looking at his options. Maybe Germany, the United Arab Emirates, and Pakistan. How would the personalized impact index help him evaluate these choices?
Okay, great scenario. Let's take Germany first. For this particular Afghan man, Germany might score very well on quality of life, good infrastructure, healthcare, etc., and maybe decent economic prospects. However, the index would likely apply that language imposition penalty because he'd need to learn German, which is unrelated to his native languages. Plus, depending on the data for social integration for Afghan men, there might be moderate challenges factored in regarding social acceptance. So those things would adjust the score for him.
Right, so it's not just the general country score.
Exactly. Now, the United Arab Emirates. For him, the UAE might benefit from the English accessibility bonus, potentially higher cultural openness in certain spheres, and no language penalty.
Sounds positive.
But on the flip side, it might score lower on long-term legal pathways, residency, citizenship options, and maybe the sense of deep social belonging could be flagged as a potential challenge for his specific demographic profile.
Okay, trade-offs again. And Pakistan.
Pakistan, well, despite the obvious cultural and linguistic proximity, it would likely score relatively lower on the quality of life dimension, things like economic stability, infrastructure, safety, and perhaps also on legal protections specifically for Afghan immigrants.
So it brings all these different, sometimes conflicting things together.
Precisely. The Personalized Impact Index takes all these varied factors, the economic, the social, the legal, the personal well-being, the language issues, and synthesizes them into that single composite score. It allows for a much more holistic and critically personalized decision than just looking at one or two factors in isolation. So connecting this back to the main point, we really believe the Personalized Impact Index represents probably the most advanced, fair, and nuanced way to measure immigrant satisfaction and success that's available today.
Yeah, it really seems to move beyond simplistic rankings. What it aims for, fundamentally, is clarity, isn't it? By weaving together all those threads, legal, social, economic, cultural, quality of life, and the key part, tailoring it to the individual, it genuinely empowers immigrants. And at the same time, it gives policymakers that much-needed precision to improve things. It just makes a hugely complex decision feel a bit more manageable.
Absolutely. And the hope is that this index doesn't just, improve transparency and choice for the millions of people looking for new homes. We see it acting as a potential catalyst, a catalyst for more inclusive, more effective, and ultimately more humane migration policies around the world. It encourages countries to genuinely engage with the lived experiences of the immigrants arriving on their shores.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, a final thought for you, our listener. Thinking about your own perspective or what you've observed, what factors do you believe are the most crucial for real immigrant success and happiness? And how might a tool like this Personalized Impact Index actually start to shift the global conversation around migration?